My task was to report or to talk to you the character of the story, which is the axolotl. So, the narrator of the axolotl exists in a unique transitional state between man and amphibian. So, once obsessed with axolotls, a part of himself now exists as an axolotl. So, the story seems to have been at least partially inspired by Kafka's. And then the metamorphosis, but it takes a wholly different approach to telling the tale. So thank you once again.
The setting of the story. The story takes place at the local Jardin des Plantes in Paris by a lonely man who regularly visits the local zoo, where he becomes fascinated by the axolotl in the aquarium.
Good day everyone! My name is Roxanne Andelapteros. So I am assigned to report the plot summary of Axolotl by Julio Cortàzar. So please listen carefully as I am going to report these following slides. Let's start! Axolotl by Julio Cortàzar, 1940-1984. Axolotl is a short story by the Argentinian writer Julio Cortàzar. The story was published in Cortázar's 1956 collection End of Game and Stories. Axolotl is narrated by a lonely man who regularly visits the local zoo, where he becomes fascinated by the axolotls in the aquarium. In time, he states that he too is an axolotl and feels he has become one of them. The narrator telling us that he used to think a great deal about the axolotls in the aquarium at the local Jardin des Plantes in Paris. So this story happens at Jardin des Plantes in Paris. He would watch them for hours, observing how immobile they were. He watched them for so long that he is now himself an axolotl too. So let's have the rising action. So the narrator tells us how he was transformed into an axolotl himself. He had been drawn to the axolotls, having grown bored of the lions and panthers at the local zoo, and had identified with them in some way. The creatures' pink faces reminded him of the Aztecs, which, like axolotls, were Mexican, and he becomes more and more fascinated by them. So the axolotl's golden eyes seemed to suggest another way of seeing. When he consulted his dictionary, he discovered that axolotls are the larval stage of a particular species of salamander. So here we go with the climax. So the movement of the metamorphosis occurs, or at least becomes apparent to the narrator one day, where he has his face pressed up against glass of the aquarium, studying the axolotls, having become fascinated by their quietness and stillness. So he looked at the axolotl at the aquarium, and he realized that he is not looking at an axolotl within the tank, but a reflection of his own face, and realizes he is now an axolotl. In a possible nod to the work of Edgar Allan Poe, an important writer for Cortázar, the narrator tells us that this realization is like a man buried alive, waking up to his fate. So the narrator has spent so long identifying with the axolotls trapped within the tank, and that he is convinced he is inside there too. So the human body remains outside the tank looking in, but his mind is within the tank, in the body of one of the creatures. So let's have the following action. The narrator concludes that the story by telling us that he, or the man whose body was firmly occupied by narrator's consciousness before it jumps ship into the axolotl, visits the aquarium less often. So, panalagsa na siya mo visit, And here is the resolution. Then now the narrator speaks us as an axolotl within his tank, rather as the man looking in on them. If he still thinks and speaks like a man, that is because axolotls themselves are human inside their heads. And the narrator believes that the man whose abode he had once inhabited may write a story about axolotls, the story we are reading. And that's all for today. Thank you and God bless.
So, good day everyone. So, my task is to discuss the analysis and the theme of the poem. So, let's go. So, one question raised by Cortàzar Axolotl is whether we should treat the story as fantasy or realism. So, in other words, whether we should view the narrator as the victim or as if he is the victim of a miraculous act of transmigration, or whether he is merely deluded and possibly mad. So, does the mind of the story's narrator miraculously transfer to the body of an axolotl? In a twist on Kafka's Grigor Samsa metamorphosing into an insect? Or does he merely believe his mind is within the body of the animals? Perhaps the question, which is, after all, undecidable, since Cortàzar, possibly unreliable narrator, is our own source for the story. It's important if we want to know how to categorize the story, but less crucial in terms of helping us to understand the story main theme, which concern the human ability to identify another species and to understand and even metamorphosis with their plague. So, and that central themes appear more broadly to be enlightenment, whether he is deluded in thinking his mind has moved into an axolotl or the transformation is an objectively real one. The narrator appears to become more enlightened as a result of his closeness to another species. So he identifies with the axolotl to such an extent that he became one. Perhaps literally, but certainly in terms of his kinship with and sympathy for the creature. So this is most apparently in the paragraph of Axolotl in which the narrator mentions monkey. So many people, he suggested, view monkeys as cousin of human because of their superficial anthropomorphic features, their physical similarities to us, but the narrator sees something in the lid of the golden eye of the axolotl which sparked a more stronger bond concisely because it is so unexpected. There is something about the pink head of the axolotl which after careful study reminds him of the human head, and their eyes appear to convey a deep knowledge. The axolotl is, for the narrator, not an animal at all, but something closer to the humans. For there is more than one metamorphosis that take place in axolotl. Viewing the creatures, the narrator tells us that he could detect a metamorphosis occurring within them too. They appear to become aware that they are somehow great consciousness trapped in their little immobile bodies, condemned to a perpetual and hopeless meditation. Can such a statement not also. If we adopt a philosophical view, we apply to human as well. So our mind or soul is the goose in the machine. Our refined and sophisticated consciousness is trapped within our imperfect bodies, and we are immobile in that we are not free to make the most of our mind's potential. The world of work, responsibilities, paying bills, and other commitments condemns us to a life within a kind of prison not unlike the Axolotl's tank. No wonder the narrator gazes at the creatures and finds himself looking in a mirror. So that would be all. Thank you.